So when you're building responsive websites, ultimately you're going to want to include images because they make such an impact on the overall messaging of your website. There's some really fun things that you can do with images that are ready for real-time users right now, and I'm going to show you some of those. The first one that we're going to talk about is how to create an background image that will stretch to fit in any size window. This uses the CSS3 property of the background cover. So let's go ahead and let's see how this is created. I've started off with just a really basic HTML5 page. It just has a div with a class of remarks, and it has a couple of headers and a paragraph within it. If we look at this page in the browser, there's not much happening. I can resize my browser window and obviously things flow because the browser itself is just allowing the elements to resize and be flexible. What we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a little bit of CSS. So I have some embedded CSS tags right here, and I'm just going to begin by making a style for the body tag. And on the body, we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply a background image. I'm going to use shorthand method, so I'm just going to write background. Then I'm going to specify URL and open the parentheses. I'll put the path to where my image is, and my image is actually in a folder called Images without an A. And I'm going to go ahead and point to my whale shark image. And we'll go ahead and tell the image not to repeat. Let's add another rule for the .remarks div that we have, and I'm just going to put some basic rules in here for font family, for font style, for the color. Let's just quickly get some of these things in here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take the background color of this box, and I'm going to drop down the opacity a little bit. So I'm going to use the opacity value right there. We'll make it 60%. And in order for this to work in some of the IE browsers, I'm going to use the filter attribute, which will allow IE browsers 8 and earlier will go ahead and render this appropriately. So we're going to pass on the alpha and specify that the opacity is equal to 60 for those older ones. I'm also going to add a position of absolute, and I'll add a top value of 20% just to push this down from the top a little bit. I'm making a box, and it's going to just be locked to the left and push down a little bit from the top. You'll see in just a second. I'm just going to throw some padding on the box, and you'll notice that I'm using % and M values because those are our responsive values that we want to be using. I'll set margin of 0. I'm going to add a width value to this. And let's go ahead and let's save this and just take a look at what we have so far. So when I look at this in the browser, this is what we have. You can see that we have an image. This is the picture of the whale, and then here's our box. Currently I can't see any of the text, although if I do highlight along the box, the text is there. The text is being colored by its parent element. Right now, all of my text is inside the remarks div, and I've turned the opacity and the color down. So what we're going to need to do right here is we're going to need to make a quick rule for the elements that are within the remarks div, and I'm just going to go ahead and set the color of these elements, and I'm using a hex value that will make these elements blue. So if we save and look at this in the browser again, now you can see the text showing up in the box. Now if I resize my browser window, you can see that the image just stays stationary. It's not scaling, and if I make my browser very, very large, and I'm going to zoom out so that you can see this, you can see that the image is just filling its one little spot. Then the rest of the background is going to be white. We can alter this by changing our CSS a little bit. So I'm going to come back to my CSS, and I'm going to use the background size attribute. So it's background-size, and I'm going to tell it to cover This is one of the new CSS3 properties, so I'm going to copy it and I'm going to add my vendor prefixes for both the Mozilla-based browsers and the WebKit-based browsers. If you want, you could even add a vendor prefix for Opera. I don't worry about Opera too much just because I feel like there's not very many users on there, but that's up to you if you want to include that or not. If we go ahead and save now and check this out in the browser, you can see that my page has changed. Now when I resize the image, even if I'm zoomed out, the image actually scales to fit within the browser. So no matter how big my screen is, this image is going to fit unless the browser becomes unproportionately scaled. And there's two ways that you can work around this. You could set a background color that would mimic the picture, and in this picture that would be pretty easy to do because I could probably sample one of the blues from the very bottom of the picture and get something that would be pretty close. Or with our CSS, we can add a couple more properties right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a background. First of all, I'm going to tell the background image to be centered by just saying center, center. This will center horizontally and vertically. And we might not be able to see this right now. Well, you can see that the image has actually changed position. So it is centering. It's actually going off the page, not exactly what we want. But if we add, in addition to that, the property of background attachment and tell that to be fixed, if we reload the page, you'll see that the image of the whale now fills the entire screen. So even if I'm very zoomed out, no matter how I resize my screen, no matter what proportions, this image of the whale shark is going to cover the entire screen. And it just moves the whale. It's not unproportionally scaling the picture at all. It's just moving the whale shark to a different location. So this is a pretty nice feature. I'm just going to zoom back in so that our text gets to be its regular size. I really like this feature. I think it is a great solution, especially if you want to display a full-size image. So no matter what screen, tiny little mobile screen or a full-size browser screen, you're going to get a nice experience with this nice big image. This is a really fun thing to incorporate into your project, is to create these background images. You want to use an image that's fairly large because the browser will make the images smaller without any loss of quality, but if they have to make them larger, the images might get fuzzy or blurry. So I would recommend that you use an image that probably has a minimum width of 1,000 or 1,200 pixels. The thing to watch out for, of course, is that your file size might get fairly large if you're dealing with a very big image like this. But in the right situation, it might be worth the impact on the file size that you might experience.